It's really significant that the Cobb Symphony is going to perform a piece by John Adams on our first Masterworks concert. This is the first time the orchestra will play a piece by John Adams, and he's one of the most important American composers of the 20th and early 21st centuries. The Wound Dresser, the piece we're going to perform, is unique for several reasons. When you think of John Adams, you often think of driving rhythms and minimalism and a sort of John Adams sound. And this piece doesn't really fit that mold. It's very different compared to a lot of his other works. And I think it's very personal. And a lot of it has to do with the story behind the piece. John Adams' father was dying, and his mother was his caretaker. And Adams was impressed with sort of the unconditional love that his mother had, and how really her life was so affected by caring for her father at the end. And he read a poem by Walt Whitman called The Wound Dresser. And the poem had to do with Whitman's sort of self-appointed job in the Civil War, and that he was a nurse. And he was not really a nurse for either side. He was just he was a nurse for the soldiers. He was sort of above the political fray in the Civil War. And it has to do with sort of unconditional love for the soldiers, respect for what they were doing, and the wanting to heal all the wounds that can happen in the horrors of war. And the piece sounds this way. It's very personal. It's very inside. The text is absolutely gorgeous text, and what Adams has done, it's different, is the orchestra sort of in the background sort of sets the mood to the text that you hear from Whitman's poem. I think the reason the sound is so unique in the Wound Dresser is the instruments that John Adams chooses to put in the orchestra. It's not a standard orchestra. It's a chamber orchestra, or a smaller orchestra than you normally find in a Romantic or 20th century symphony. And he makes some very interesting choices for the kind of instruments he puts in there. So for example, the mood is almost always set by a synthesizer, not an instrument you typically find in a classical symphony. And also he uses, instead of a regular trumpet, he uses a piccolo trumpet. It's like a miniature trumpet that you'd find that sort of gives the effect of a reveille, or of the different sounds you'd find in maybe a bugle in the middle of a battle. And plus the string writing is very atmospheric throughout. It's very high, very shimmery, often very slow, just these big patches of sound that sort of set the mood for the piece. When you think of the history of our region, the first thing that usually gets brought up is the Civil War. And this piece is such a direct comment on the Civil War without actually commenting on the politics of the Civil War. And I think that's part of Adams and Whitman's brilliance, is that it sort of is able to be above the political aspects of the Civil War. So Whitman and Adams don't ever take sides. They don't ever decide who's right or who's wrong, and if the war was right or if the war was wrong, or anything about that. It simply has to do with the facts that there was a war and the repercussions as a result. And it's a very beautiful setting for that reason, I think, because it allows you to sort of just see things from the perspective of a single soldier who may have been wounded in a battle, and what it's like not only for that soldier, but also for the person who's caring for that soldier. And it's a very unique and, I think, difficult thing to do for an artist to make a statement, in a sense, without making a political statement. And I think that's what Adams is so great at doing, and that's why I think it ties in so well to the local history that we have.